give people notifications that Shatay and Arielle are live.
There it is. Hello.
We're live. We made it. Oh my goodness. We didn't think we were going to be able to, right?
StreamYard was giving us some palpitations, but this was meant to be. So it is going to work out. So
oh my gosh, we're here.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you. Welcome to Exit and Elevate, a conversation to help you execute your next pivot. Mm-hmm. My name is Arielle Deane. For those of you who don't know me, I am the creator of the podcast, The Independent Mom, and also the CEO of Powerful Motherhood, where I work with high-achieving women and moms to confidently transition out of corporate and into entrepreneurship. And I'm here with Shatay Hayes. Shatay?
Yes, I'm so excited about this. So hi, folks. I'm Shatay Hayes. I am a certified business coach and a career strategist. And I'm the founder of Career Steward, where we help professionals live their purpose and love their work. So I'm so excited to talk with you again today, Arielle, about this topic. And so what is it? What are we doing here?
So today we did sort of a part one, which was great. Mm-hmm. So on a lot of things at a high level, but I think what we wanted to come back to today was to really double click on some of the things that we all have thought about, but we may not really need to pinpoint. And so we talked a lot in the first series, or first conversation about what you can do, but we didn't identify how do you actually know if it's time to pivot. And so we're going to talk today about three signs when it's time for a professional pivot, and then what you actually can do about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can I start us off with a little socializing or normalizing a professional pivot? So I know this came up a little bit in our last conversation, and it's something that I talk about with clients all the time too, or just in general with people. We probably came up with parents and grandparents who worked the same jobs for like 30 plus years, or even if it wasn't the same job, like at the same company, they were the same profession for their lifetime, right? So if someone started as an educator, they ended their professional career as an educator. My mom, for example, started as in like this oil and gas industry, because I'm from Houston, working in the tax department, and has literally done that for the entirety of her career. So when I came about my first professional pivot, I felt like something was wrong with me. Like, I'm not staying in the same thing. I feel flaky. So here's some stats to let you know that you're not alone, right? So according to the U.S. Department of Labor, the average person will change careers 5 to 7 times during their working life. And there's so much other data that's like how many hours we work in a lifetime, and then by what age. I think I read somewhere it's like by 31, most folks will have had their first career pivot already. I mean, just super, super normal, right? It's not a rare thing. Here's one more from the World Economic Forum. So because technology is changing so rapidly, like the headline of this article was having many careers will be the norm. So if you're in a situation and it's not quite feeling right anymore, we'll get into the signs later. Like, just know you're in good company. The overwhelming majority of professionals will pivot several times over in their lives, and that's to be expected.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So we know most folks know my story. I'm very open about it. Started my first career as a professional dancer, choreographer, got a master's in dance, but I did a ton of things as a professional dancer, right? So an educator, choreographed a ton of theater, dance, performed everywhere, like literally just did a ton of things. And then one day I don't want to do it anymore. And so I was like, I want a different lifestyle. I need more, what's the more? Luckily for me, I had already fallen in love with career development before my pivot, and I started helping artists like launch their careers. And that really made way for me to pivot into career development full time. And then I had a number of pivots even within that work alone. So tell us, Arielle, like, what's your relationship with professional pivots?
Very similar. I started out because I live in the DC area. Everyone starts off as a government contractor. Yeah. So I worked for a government contractor for years, realized I hated it. And I was like, I need to pivot out of this profession, out of this industry. And so I wasn't totally sure what to do. So like, any super high achiever, I went and got a degree. So I went to get my MBA, but that was the beginning of me, one, also just realizing that there were so many other careers out there. Like, I remember meeting people and I was like, you get paid to do that? Like, there's just so many roles and opportunities and careers and industries that sometimes we think it's just what's around us and we can get so pigeonholed into that space. And we don't take the time to look around. And so coming out of business school, I went into a super niche area. I did innovation consulting for years, helping mostly small businesses and some startups learn how to grow their businesses, how to start up, how to learn about their customers. And then I was like, actually, I want to go back to big companies. So then I worked for a huge company doing a lot more corporate strategy out of the consulting space. And then I think, similar to you, realize, you know what, I think it's actually time that I want to do something on my own. And so this latest pivot has been more into entrepreneurship. But I think the benefit of pivoting is in every single situation, one, it increased my income. And in almost every single situation, it just allowed me to explore a different part of myself. And so I think understanding the signs of when it's time for a professional pivot is super helpful, so that you don't just stay stuck thinking it's something that's wrong with you, but you can also do something about it and start to move closer to what you really want. So that's definitely my relationship with pivoting.
Oh, can I hop in really quick? You said something really a call out that I think is important to note that I don't think I call it all the time. You said with every professional pivot, you've like gotten more money, right? And I think the same has been true for me. Every time I've pivoted, I've gotten to a more. And I would love for us to maybe, even if you're sitting with a pivot right now that you're trying at a crossroads, I'll say, and you're trying to determine what your next steps are. I think a lot of people don't give themselves permission to change because of the fear of the unknown, right? So like a lot of people say like the devil I know versus the devil I don't, or, you know, at least I know what's going on here. Or I have bills to pay, so I'm going to settle for what my circumstances are right now instead of maybe taking the leap of faith to see what else is out there. And I think it's a really good call out to say, more often than not, especially if you're doing the right type of preparation and your intentions are in the right place, that you're going to get the more that you're after. So whether that be more income, maybe that's more fulfillment, which is what my preference and joy is around, helping people feel more fulfilled in their work. Maybe it's like more freedom, like whatever the more is that you're seeking after, give yourself permission to go after it. And you'll get to it. Right.
100%. I think that's so powerful. And to be okay, like on the flip side, that you may have to take a step back financially to get more freedom or get more fulfillment, but it may still come back to you in the long run, right? So I think that's
always
really important to highlight too.
Always come back to you for sure.
So let's jump in. Let's talk about some of these signs. So I think sign number one is probably the one, at least for me, that I've seen and people that I've worked with, is the most common. It's really just about being not motivated anymore. And how I think that can show up sometimes is not wanting to go to work, right? I think that's the most obvious one, but it can't even be more subtle. Like it can be little things like just sort of going through the motions. You're always trying to figure out, how can I take a day off? You just don't feel as excited or motivated. And it may be that you have a great job. You may like your team. I know for me, that was a similar thing, right? But I just felt like I've done this already. I know what to do. There was no freshness, no excitement. I didn't have the same drive and motivation. And I think for a lot of us, we sort of just assume that's just 9 to 5. Like that was what I was like for a lot of it. And I know a lot of other people that I've talked to, they're just kind of like, well, isn't that kind of just what corporate life is like? Like you just sort of to it. But actually that's often a sign that it might be time for a more professional pivot. I think that's a big one. Any thoughts on that one?
I would say that yes, not motivated, not being engaged. I've seen that in team members, like in direct reports before. The other thing I would say is that it could also show up as a different emotion. So for me, it was a signal. I did have moments where I was like, I'm not that excited to do this anymore. And I knew enough about myself to pay attention to that. So when I knew it was time for me to move on from my dance career, for example, I used to always get really excited about choreographing our end of the semester concerts and just kind of really had my vision, and I was choosing songs. And one particular semester, I was just kind of like, we got to do this again. And I was like, oh, that's something to pay attention to because you actually like this. But there are other moments when I was pivoting in my corporate career and like going from like career coach to like a career programs exec, were there moments where I was like, okay, frustrated. It felt more like frustration and less disengagement or apathy. It was more like, why are we solving this problem again? I've already solved it like 3 years ago. Or, why isn't anyone listening when, if we've said we've already done this before? And it was like, okay, I'm showing up like really irritably. And that feels like it's something. And I need to actually double click on that and see what that something is. So it was kind of like a sameness.
Yeah.
To your point, that was like annoying me that I needed to like really, really address. And so I would just call out that maybe lack of motivation could be, the symptoms could be surfacing as something else. Yeah.
I mean, I used to call it sort of Groundhog Day. It's like when you feel like you're in this Groundhog Day, and it's just like, for some people, right, it gets you sad. You might start to feel like you're depressed, or to your point, it may just become irritable, right? Like everything people say to you, you're like, I don't know, whatever, right? Like you're just so not about it, and you're like, I mean, I told you this last year, like whatever you want to do, right? I think the part that's really important, at least for me, is starting to pay attention to that, right? Not judging ourselves because we feel that way, but getting a little bit curious, right? Like, that's interesting. Like even your ability to notice that you were irritable, I feel like that's the first step to being like, hey, let me just do a little bit of thinking about that. So that's getting a little bit into what to do about it, but I think that's definitely sign number one for sure.
I like that a lot. And I will also call out, like, so people aren't monoliths. Some people actually prefer sameness. Like, I know that there are people who want to go to work and they want a stable work environment and they want to know what they have to do and they want to be able to do that every day so they can go to work, collect a paycheck, and live their lives outside of work. I think that's totally okay. So this, I think we're talking about this one in particular. If you're the type of person where actually you appreciate being stretched and growing and you want something new and you kind of, you want to be challenged a little bit at work, this is probably a little bit more for you. So I don't want to like, if you're someone who's feeling like the sameness actually works for you and that lights you up, all good. But if the sameness, if the motivation is problematic, then definitely let's look a little bit into it.
Totally. Yep.
Great moment to go into the next one. If you aren't getting any bites. So like this comes up, I have people that like colleagues or even and clients who I can clearly tell when it's time to pivot. So this, I think the sign that we discussed before is like, if you're in a job, what if you could be in a job or you could be not in a job in this one and you are looking for something else. I hear time and time again people that I've supported where they like, I've submitted 200 applications. I'm not getting any bites. That clearly is a signal to me that something needs to change. Either the narrative that you're telling is not right, the types of jobs that you're applying to are not, like, you've got to pivot somewhere. So if none of the doors that you are approaching are opening, sometimes that's a sign that you might need to reconsider the doors that you're knocking on. You have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah. And what I think is interesting about what you said is sometimes we just think, oh, well, if we just knock on 100,000 more, which sometimes, right, that is sometimes persistence is key. Sometimes you just need an introduction. You need someone to open the door. But oftentimes it's not necessarily like, there's a reason why you're probably leaving where you're leaving. And it may be that even your lack of motivation, right, is showing up in how you're interviewing and how you write the things on your resume. And so it's important to really think about, like, am I stalling out here because I'm trying to go back to the same thing that maybe isn't working, right? And so I think that's a really big piece of, if you're getting stalled out, maybe that's a sign that you've hit the wall in this professional space or professional industry, whichever one it might be.
Yeah. And then I think that pivot is like an invitation to think bigger, to think differently, right? To your point, I love that part of your story is like you were an innovation consultant. Oh my gosh, that's so sexy. Like you get to help people think bigger and differently, reimagine themselves, like reinvent themselves. And so, this is so typical, especially with folks who've gone through some sort of upskilling program, right? So whether that be a boot camp or, maybe it's a degree program like you've gone through, and they've gone through this program because something about it appealed to them. And then they come out of it thinking like, okay, now I need to get the type of job that exactly fits this thing that I've done. This is just one example of how this shows up.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have gone to, be an example I've seen time and time again, I'll just use this as an example, is like if I've gone to like a coding boot camp, I'm gonna go out and only look for like software engineer, developer job titles, and like I'm just gonna apply to all of those, but I'm not getting anywhere. And it's like, well, actually, what about like remixing what you've learned with who you already are, and like finding that opportunity,
Yeah.
right? Or even making that opportunity. Why do we, it's like, it's another, I think, example, another way we sort of put ourselves in boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
we don't even give ourselves the permission. So I think even in the first sign, it was like, or before we started the conversation, giving ourselves the permission to pivot. Like this is another, like, can even pivoting in the pivot, give yourself permission to like even be something different than I guess you had thought you were, or something like that.
And to not feel like it means you have to completely betray who you are.
Yeah.
I love what you said about remix, because in every pivot, there's usually something that I had done in a previous role that actually made me really interesting and unique for this next role. They were like, oh, when I did consulting and I went and worked for this really small boutique consulting firm in the beginning, what they loved is that I had actually worked for really big corporations. Even though I was trying to get away from that space, I understood that environment, I understood the language, and those were the clients, right, that we were working with. Those were the people that we wanted to make sure we understood how to impress and how to create it. And so you don't necessarily have to reject or completely let go of all of the things before when you're pivoting, but it is just sort of about it's a pivot, right? It's a redirect. It's a reframing of how you maybe talk about it and what you're looking for. And I like that idea of remixing it, right? How do you bring those pieces together and create this new area that you're going to go after in a meaningful way? So I think that's really powerful.
Like beyond powerful. And you said, I think you should be okay with like bringing your past with you. I would venture to say you need to bring your past with you. Like if you are changing careers or changing anything about your professional self, it does not mean to abandon everything that you were and before the pivot. So my example, when I went from, professional dances being my whole world to like now career development being my whole world. I was a coach. And I remember going into my first day as like a coach in this ed tech space and saying, I was a professional dancer. Like, I did not, even though everyone else had come from, like, I was a recruiter and I worked in HR and those kind of things. I was like, actually, I just came from a creative field and I was like educating, artists and like helping them launch their careers. And so I saw that in all of the work that I do, literally so much, like 90 something % of my world as a professional artist and educator, I use in everything that I do. The creative thinking, the working with others, the influence, like literally everything that I was or did in that line of work, it is still valuable for the work that I do today. So nothing is wasted.
Yes, nothing is wasted at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. Should we move on to sign number 3?
Go for it. Yeah.
Right. Sign number 3, I think, is very, very different than some of the other ones, but it is super, super important.
Yeah.
You are in a toxic work environment.
It
is time for a professional pivot. And sadly, right now, I have spoken to too many people and too many clients and too many relatives who have found themselves in toxic work environments and are trying to figure out how to stay, how to make it work, how to move around. But if you feel like you are being bullied on a day-to-day, if everything you do is wrong, is nitpicked, you feel like you can't win, you're scared to speak at, like, that's not normal. And that is not an environment where you can thrive, where you will be healthy. So that one for me, it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge like career pivot. Like maybe you could keep doing what you're doing, but you need to get out of that environment and really start to figure out how do you how do you get out of a space that is not authentic to who you are and is not allowing you to thrive? So that one we were just like, we had to put that in here
I
because
mean,
it's
yeah.
becoming an epidemic in a lot of places for a lot of us.
Like, how much time you got? So, I will first start off by saying I have actually been very fortunate to have some very positive work experiences and to be on very supportive and empowering teams and to be led by very supportive, empowering leaders. Shout out to Jennifer Henry, who was like my leader at 2U and who is still a mentor and a friend to me today, but like literally advocating for me and sponsoring me in spaces where I'm not even in as a Black woman and a white woman. Like that's not always the case for a lot of people. So I've been very, very blessed in that way. And I have also experienced work environments where, yikes, like, what are we doing here? Experiences that I've had, for example, and this, I guess, doesn't really necessarily need to speak to like it's time to go, but if things like this are your norm, then you want to pay attention. Like, listen, I think the takeaway in general is like pay attention to your energy, like pay attention to how you're feeling. Like don't dismiss that. How you're feeling is valid, but having to be concerned about like if I'm smiling enough in a meeting, like because someone thinking like a straight face when every other person in the meeting is able to be multitasking, straight face, brow furrowed, but if mine is, then I'm mad. I
Mhm.
look angry. Like that's
Team player, like I'm on board with things. Yep.
That's problematic. So, my face can't be my face in a meeting? Like, that's problematic. Or, yeah, like, we don't need to, like, go down the list of, like, what qualifies as a toxic work environment, but if someone is open, like, wants that kind of conversation so they can validate their experiences, maybe we do a
Mhm.
part
Yeah.
3, but yeah, if it's not healthy, if it's not, if you're not growing and thriving there, that's definitely it's time to
It's
get
time
out.
to do it. And if you think it might be toxic, it's probably toxic, right? I think lots of times we sort of hover around and we want to ask our friends, like, is this normal? Does this seem odd to you? Like, usually if we ask the question, we already know the answer. You already know it's
Yeah.
probably not right. You already know it's probably time to go. But for whatever reason, maybe it's money, maybe it's status, maybe you don't know where else you would go. You feel like maybe you should stay put. But I think really thinking about that as a non negotiable and
Mhm.
figuring out, okay, what do I need to do? How do I start to get myself in a position to make a professional pivot and know that it will be the best for you? No matter how you leave that environment, you will still be able to get another job. You will have people who will be able to support
Yeah.
you. But it's really, really important and really powerful to get out of environments where you're going to be doomed in space anyway, right? So you might as well go and move somewhere where you can be happy and where you can thrive.
Yeah, and I will say that it's super important. I've had a recent client actually when we were working through their career transition, like you gotta try not to stay in toxic situations too long because it's doing more harm to you than you realize. Like the amount of stuff that we had to talk through, she and I, around like how her confidence had been impacted, about what she even thought she could go after as a result of the toxicity of where she had been, like just like really second guessing your worth, like that kind of stuff will really impede your ability to like go and show up as your full self in the interview process as you try to move on. So like when you notice toxicity, like get the support you can. Hopefully there's like a really great ERG at your organization or a really positive and supportive HR team, like something. Hopefully you're in therapy, something. But like the longer you stay there, the more it is likely to impact your confidence as you're wanting, decide to make the pivot in the first place.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point because the confidence piece
Yeah.
is so huge. And so much of what that toxic environment is trying to do is break you down, right? Make you feel like you have to just take it and you couldn't get anything else. And so I love that you mentioned that because the longer you stay, the harder it is for you to believe that you can leave, that you can believe that you still have value. And so I always say, like, as soon as someone starts talking about stuff that like just from your history or from all these other things, that it sounds wrong, time to go.
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to try to work to break you down. And you have to make sure that you can stay strong and keep your confidence and know what you have and know what you can do. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Okay. So then let's talk a little bit about what to do about these. We said the first one was what? You're not motivated.
yep.
Second sign was it's you're getting stalled. It's like you're knocking on these doors and nothing's happening. And I would even say, I didn't say this when we were talking about that sign. It doesn't have to be like job opportunities. Like maybe you're in the same role at your
Mhm.
current organization and you're not able to move up no matter how you try. You can't go lateral, you can't go up. Like it's just like you're just stuck. That
Yes.
is definitely a form of being stalled. And then third, we said you're in a toxic work environment. And so Arielle and I thought that the process to move beyond these and to pivot, like the steps were pretty similar. And so we'll get started with those. Am I doing the first tip?
Yeah. You want to jump in on that?
Sure. I mean, because it's one of my faves. uh, Self-reflection. I'm super obsessed with it. But no, you really got to do reflection. So whether it's like we said, you're not motivated, you're annoyed, like how you're showing up at work is different. You got to pay attention to that. You have to pay attention to like, okay, I keep trying all of these things that are not working. Something's got it right. So doing, what do they say? The definition of insanity is like doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If you are just like, I'm just going to keep trying the same road, like maybe we need to reimagine it. And then the toxic work environment too. Like you got to pay attention to those signs and then do a bit of, I think it's self-reflection and like understanding what is the situation that I'm in, what's problematic about it, what do I want to change, and be clear about actually what it is that you want to have different. Like what is the more to the earlier part of our conversation, we were saying people move towards more money, more fulfillment, more freedom, more flexibility. What's the thing that's missing? And like what actually would you try like to move towards? I think that's really important to know. I think another part of reflection, and I think research also kind of goes into this, but I think research also kind of goes into number two, and I'll leave that to you. But like also, like I love assessments during this phase, right? Like just kind of understanding, like, okay, what are my strengths? What are the things that I can bring with me? What are the things I want to bring with me in this next chapter? What are the things I actually don't want to bring with me? So, in the case if you're not motivated or energized, it's like, okay, I really like these parts of my job or the work that I'm doing. This is my A and B work. This is C and D. So is there a way that I can bring like these curiosities that I have, this goal of more freedom or flexibility along with this type of work and figure out what that job is? Like do that kind of reflection. Or, okay, I keep applying to these kind of jobs and they're not working. And what do I like about the jobs themselves? Maybe I need to look at another job title, like that kind of reflection, like really not just sit and think about what's happening, but like process it and apply it in a way that will allow you to come out with a different approach on the other side. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think thinking about maybe not even just the job you're in, but if you've had any other previous roles, right? What was it that you liked about that role before? I think a lot of the pivots, I went back to previous roles and I was like, I really loved and I felt energized when I
Yeah.
was working with women small business owners or
Yep.
looking at jobs and like highlighting like what were all of the things that jump out at you about different job descriptions.
Yeah.
And so I really like what you said about just reflecting and getting clear, not just on what's wrong with where you are, but what do you want? What are you
Yep.
trying to go towards? And that was probably one of the most powerful pieces of advice I received early in my career, right? Is never run away from something. Make sure you're always running towards something. Now, if you're
Yeah.
in a toxic work environment, you might need to run away. But, right, you want to make sure that you have thought through what would it look like to be in the environment that actually does make me thrive. It does have the things that I want. And so getting really clear on that and reflecting on what have been the spaces and the environments and the work that has made me feel more energized and more motivated and more alive. So I like that one a lot for reflect.
Yes. So good. Okay.
All right, so we're tip number two, which I think is kind of tag team a little bit with number one. So number two is really about preparing.
Yeah.
So preparing, which to me is also about creating a plan. I'm an MBA. Everything has a plan. We love Excel. I love systems. But I think a lot of time going back to that whole not running away, moving towards something, we can get so caught up in, I just got to get out of this job. I just don't want to be at this job anymore, and not have an actual plan or be prepared for what to do next.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about preparing, there's probably number one, is I think the most important one, which is preparing financially. Getting really clear on what you make right now. A lot of us think we make more than we actually like take or keep, or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe you actually think you make less than you do, but actually looking at that, like breaking down, what am I paying for health insurance? What am I putting in for retirement? Getting a really good, clear understanding of that and having those records so that when you start looking at other opportunities, you are making a good one-to-one understanding of like, what are the trade-offs? What are the things that you might be giving up? And then starting to think about, what are you going to need financially? Like, what's really that, I call it your lifestyle limit. What's that lifestyle limit? Like the minimum amount that you need to be able to still be okay and to still be comfortable, just so that you have some flexibility as you look at different roles, and you may be able to take a slight hit on maybe pay, but maybe it's because you get more stock, right? You get more equity. And so really being able to understand and prepare yourself financially to have that financial roadmap and what you might need to do, and to think about all the different ways that going into a new space might change, might shift. The other piece is preparing, I think, just your record. So this is aligns a little bit with the reflection, but lots of us get performance reviews at the end of the year. We spend a ton of time writing them, and we leave them on our company system. So the first thing I always tell people is make sure you have your copies of your reviews. Anytime people have given you any praise, anytime you've done anything well, anything that you created from your own intellectual property, make sure that you have that, because whether you decide to go into entrepreneurship or go into another field or another industry, you want to be able to, one, remind yourself what you have done. Remind yourself of how great you are. Remind yourself of all of your accomplishments, but then also be able to talk very confidently to other employers, or when you start to create your own programs, about what you can do and how you have those resources. So I think preparing is really important. We think preparing just means, well, I know I want to leave, and so I got my resume together, but really think about the totality of what it looks like to start to pivot, and how you can set yourself up in the best way to be ready for that, and to not panic or do things out of desperation, but to really make sure that you're in control and you're moving yourself through this pivot. This pivot's not like smacking you around. So any thoughts on that one?
That's really powerful. I love the thought about keeping your own performance reviews. And I wish that that is something that I would have thought or known to do, because that's really, really powerful. I think that, one of the ways I makes me feel okay about not having is that I did a pretty good job, and I kind of fallen off. Did a pretty good job of getting LinkedIn recommendations from folks I was working with, like when I was working with them. So that I think is helpful. But yeah, to have like the data of the performance reviews is a really, really good idea that I don't think I ever thought myself. I think the financial prep is super key, and it's something that I wish I had done a better job of when I pivoted from, professional dancer to, being in the career world full time. I will say another element of prep is also like the mental strategy or preparation. So if you are moving from one career to the next, one job to the other, even if it's in the same field, like there is also this sort of preparation in terms of how long the search might take. And so the job market is interesting, and it feels like, especially in the tech space, it's a hot mess these days. One of the things we didn't touch on in the data, and I had a stat and just completely forgot about it, is how many folks have been laid off in the past like 2 to 3 years alone in the tech sector, right? And so because new technologies are introduced like AI, and like the types of jobs that are available are changing, right? So it's not that AI is replacing jobs per se or people per se. It's like the nature of work, the workforce is shifting. And so the types of jobs that people are applying to, it's just weird. And it's got to, like, we're waiting for the dust to settle. And so I could remember supporting folks, like 2018, 2019 to new jobs, and like within 90 days for sure. Like as long as you have the right message and you're applying to the right, like you're aligned in what you're looking for and you are presenting yourself well and you can interview well, within 90 days tops, you're in a new role. These days,
Yeah.
not so much. And there's like it's because of factors completely beyond people's control, right? And so I would also say, like, one, try to make sure that you're not in a situation where you're literally like, I need to get out of this place immediately or else, which I think warrants a different kind of conversation. But if you've got the space and the mental, like psychological safety to have a runway, then really kind of budget the amount of time that it might take you to find something else. 6 to 9 months maybe works, depending on what your approach is to that job search. If you're relying more on like networking and conversations, it might take you a little bit long. Just there's a lot of nuances that we can kind of go into that I don't think we necessarily have the time for. But really make sure as you're budgeting financially, understanding like what you need to live and like what you would like, all of those things, but also know like, okay, how much time do I need to actually sort of implement this plan? What's realistic for the pivot on the other side of this?
Yeah, and I just want to tag team on that because these are all definitely steps to do when you know it's time to make a professional pivot, but some of them like just do because the more you are already ready, the sooner you can make that pivot, right? So if you've already been saving up, and maybe you don't want to put all of your money in savings, you can still invest it, right? But if you already are in a habit of after every review, you save that down on your own computer, not your company computer, right?
Yeah.
Send it to yourself. That is your documentation. That is perfectly legal. If every single time that you are looking at your finances, your budget, think about, hey, maybe I do want to put something in an HSA. Maybe I do want to put, what are some areas where you could actually start to get ahead of things that you may want to take with you when you leave to another job, right? And so really thinking about how you set yourself up so that you can have a little bit more of that financial flexibility. So you don't need to wait another year and a half before you can make a pivot because you're not ready, but you're always sort of in that mindset and moving towards those things. So I just wanted to piggyback on that piece because I can go deep on the money and financial prep part.
Yeah, which I mean might need to be a whole other conversation, quite honestly, because there's a lot that you could share there. I feel like we're leaving out something. Didn't we say there was something like another part of prep with like going from a corporate job to corporate job and not necessarily, or did we touch on everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one piece that I think the financial piece probably weighs more heavily if you are going from corporate to entrepreneurship because, right, for most of us, I know definitely for me, the fear about entrepreneurship was I need my healthcare and I cannot be broke, right?
Yeah.
And so just, being really mindful very early on about some of those financial moves. But to your point, even if you're changing corporate to corporate, you may still have a 6 to 9 month window where you need to be comfortable with that change and with that shift. And so I think there's probably still those same similarities. The biggest differences for me were things like figuring out healthcare. A lot of us think we pay way so much more for healthcare when you're not in a job, but like actually look at what you're paying for healthcare in your job. Your job is subsidizing it 100%, but it's not free. Like I feel like we think it's 0 to 1,000. It's like, no, it's probably like 700 to 1,000, so I think it's just some of those little bits and pieces, being mindful about your investments and thinking about, hey, maybe I might need to move more towards cash as opposed to retirement for a short period of time, just so that I have runway as I start my business. So yes, we can go into a deeper dive on that if people are interested as you make this shift to entrepreneurship. But I do think those are probably the biggest differences in prep. I can't remember if there was anything else we wanted to touch on, but I think those were the main ones.
Yeah, the main ones. And if it wants to surface by the end of this conversation, it'll come back up. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So final tip, we started with reflect. Number 2 was prep. And the final one is to connect. And all of the tips so far are super important. And like this one is like just as, if not more important, you've got to have, like, this is not something that you can do in isolation. So if you're thinking about, even just finding a job search, that's not even something that you can do in isolation. So if your approach is just to be applying to things online, like cold applications, like that's not, that's not, think again, right? Yeah. Yeah. Try again, right? But connect, meaning like, leverage your network, not just in a sense of like getting a new opportunity, but reach out to folks for a sounding board. In that reflection phase, if you're trying to understand what it is that you want, maybe ask a couple of folks, hey, what do you think I'm good at? Like, what do you think, how do you feel about, these things? What would you say my top professional skills or qualities are? Maybe it's reaching out to a mentor or, someone or a coach to help you kind of think through things, maybe make some introductions. And then when you know where you're headed to, of course, it's reaching out to folks for introductions. Like, do you know of any opportunities? But it's not something that you can do alone. You definitely need the support of family, friends, your mentors, whoever, to make the pivot happen. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with all of that. And from both the standpoint, I like how you separate it. It's not just about doing it for a network, although I think that's a huge part of it too, is before you leave your professional work environment, go to lunch, have coffee with people who you may down the line want to reach back out to, or you may want them to give you a recommendation, right? Just so that they know you, that you stay connected, even though once you're not seeing each other face to face, you have a chance to kind of make that connection, say what you want. But definitely even more so on the personal side. Sometimes when we feel unmotivated and we don't like what we are, at least for me, and we kind of become like our own little isolation, right? We kind of get quiet. We don't want to get social. And that actually oftentimes makes it worse because then you can't even take your head out of the sand to get perspective. But really connecting with people, sometimes it's also just helpful to know, like, like there's actually people who really do care about me. There are people who do want the best for me, who think that I do a good job, because you can get in your head a lot when you just don't feel like you're like have it in your mojo anymore, right? And I think that confidence piece, especially if you're in a toxic work environment. So building in and being very intentional about connecting. The other piece that I would add though is also connecting with people that maybe you can help. So especially I think if you're trying to think about something entrepreneurial, you may have some thoughts and want to dabble, like connect with some of your friends, connect with other people and say, hey, can I, try this out on you? Can I, whether it's making something or coaching, whatever it might be, so that you have a safe ability to test this thing out before you make a full leap into something else. So I think connecting it's always huge, right? They say your net worth is your network, but people tend to think of that in an icky way of like just using people. But it really is about connecting with people, learning more about yourself, about how you work. For me, I know some of the best advice that I have gotten about how to think about different roles or move to next steps have been from people that I've worked with in the past or people that I've managed. Some of the nicest things that I never would have thought about myself have come from just reaching back out to people and letting them know, hey, I'm considering looking into another opportunity, would love any of your thoughts or your guidance. You don't have to tell people, I hate my job, I'm in a toxic, you don't have to go into all of that. But I think to your point earlier around the stats, it's not uncommon anymore for people to explore, to look for other opportunities, to pivot professionally. I think even within large corporations, there is a bigger push to give people that exposure and to give more opportunities for people to move around the organization. And so not being afraid to be open and to connect with people in a genuine way so that you can also learn what might be the best next step for you. So I think that's a huge one that people sometimes I think of as it as like, oh, it's just networking. And, that can sometimes have a bad rap, but really embracing it more as connecting and doing that in a way that feels good and feels genuine for you.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's very specific to the third sign with the toxic work environment, I think this could also be about seeking support or connecting for where you are. So I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, connecting with, is there a leader, someone within the organization that can support you and sort of validate what you're feeling and help you sort of navigate it? Is it HR? Is it an ERG? Unfortunately, I've heard some really awful stories about, HR reps kind of mishandling situations when someone feels like they're in a toxic work environment. I would still advocate that you do it. And then I'm going to even backtrack one step and say back to the prep. Document everything. Like have your receipts. I think having your performance reviews is really excellent, but then also like if you are reaching out to people within the organization, nothing is happening, or even if it is, make sure you have everything written down, like have a paper trail, have your screenshots, like do all the things that you need to do to make sure that you CYA for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great advice.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Or like even especially outside, like if you have anyone in your family, any of your friends who are attorneys who you can talk to that you don't have to worry about, like, is HR going to be involved? Just thinking really more broadly about that. But I love the documenting piece because I think a lot of us just assume, well, I had the conversation and it's like, well, does that always count? Not always. So make sure you have your receipts. And even if you had a verbal conversation, write it down, make sure you copyright what was said and what happened, and make sure you can create that paper trail. So that's huge. I love that one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then, as you're dealing with your psychological safety and how it feels at your workplace, if you do decide to move on from the role or from the organization, because unfortunately there is that, like, it's well known, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, right? That's unfortunate. But if you are moving on, the other part of the connection is, find out like where you're headed. That's why it's so important to reflect and know where you're going so that you can know like what folks around you can help you to sort of manifest that, in the best way possible.
And make sure you connect when you move to the new role. I think sometimes we get so caught up in like, okay, I've got to do the job, I've got to do the things, but also making sure that you're connecting. There might be connections of people that that know people in that organization that you can start to reach out to and speak to even before you make some pivots. So that gets back to, helping you not just throw your resume in a pile, but actually having a personal one-to-one connection when you apply to places, but connecting with people, even if you're interviewing. I think this was also a tip. Someone else had told me, one of my great managers, was even if you're not sure if you want that job, and even if you don't get the job, sometimes that is a connection and introduction in and of itself, right? So always making sure that you are presenting yourself in the best way, understanding that those organizations, because even if you end up being somewhere tangential, you've now made an introduction, you now know the person who is, in charge of X, Y, and Z, and you never know how that might come around. So make sure you are connecting. And if you have a great connection with people you maybe interview with, it's okay to stay connected and or reconnect with them. So I think that's also a really good tidbit, is even if you don't get the job, don't sour necessarily those connections that you have made, because now you actually do know people at other organizations and you never know how it might come back full circle.
1000%. Just like meet people, form new friendships, just it. Because you literally never know what's going to happen. I literally in a million years never thought when we met in our entrepreneurial circle that we would be like some months later doing a LinkedIn Live together. So you literally never know.
You never know. It's so true. So
true. Where your relationships can go. Okay, so we have talked about a lot of things. Should we recap the signs and the tips really quickly?
Through it a little bit.
You want to go for it? And I'll you.
Our top 3 signs, I know we talked about number 1, if you are not feeling motivated, you don't feel engaged, you're not excited about your job, might be time to think about a professional pivot. And maybe you're angry, right? It doesn't have to just be dejected and tired. It can also be angry and irritable. So check it on yourself and see if you are truly still motivated for what you're doing for your work.
Yep.
Second sign, number 2, is that you are getting stalled. So that could be either within your job, you can't move to the next level, you feel like you're always getting pushback about being good enough, or you already know you want to leave, but you just keep hitting a dead wall every time you apply, every time you try to go to interviews. So that might be that you're getting a little bit stalled. It's totally time for a pivot. And then sign number 3, you are in a toxic work environment. And that's if you feel at all like someone is targeting you, like you can't do anything. You guys probably know the signs. We all know about microaggressions.
Yeah.
So if you are in a toxic work environment, you don't have to blast it to the world, but acknowledge it and then start to make your steps to make a pivot.
Can I add one more thing there? I know we're already past this, but I just had another thought. Sometimes you don't have to be targeted for the work environment to be toxic. Like, I
Mhm.
think sometimes the culture can be toxic. And
Yeah.
so that's another thing to pay attention to. Like, is there gaslighting in the culture? Is it like, is there's
Or
there
competitive or
if whatever is happening in the culture is just not creating psychological safety and you don't feel set up to do your best work and to be your best self, like, yeah, pay
Mhm. Or even
attention.
if it's just not the right environment for you, like I think
Yeah,
some of
sure.
us also, I mean, that may not make it toxic, but
Yeah.
it may just be that like the environment is, I've been in an environment where it was all like super young, go, 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 work till 8 o'clock, right? And I was like, that's no longer my environment.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
might be time for a pivot. So this one is about toxic work environment, but it also could just be if the environment is just not good for you, right? It's not a good fit for you anymore, and you just don't feel aligned to it. It might also be time for a pivot. So I like that you added that back in.
Perfect. Tips.
All right. So what are our tips? So number 1, reflect. Think about what you want to do. Think about where you want to go, not just about what's happened. And then really start to understand yourself, whether that means reflecting on what other people have said and what you like, what you don't like, but spending some time before you just jump into the next thing that might be a repeat. Really spend some time to reflect, to get clear, and to think about what's going to be next for you.
Ooh, yes. And you know what else is coming up for me right now as we talk about reflect again? To your earlier point about not just running away from something, but you need to be running towards something. If you don't do the time to reflect and understand what it is that you don't like where you are and what you actually do want, you do run the risk, as Arielle just said, of repeating the same thing. So I've heard of lots of folks who are like, oh, I gotta just get out of this environment, I gotta get out of this job. And they get to the next job and they hate it there too. And I
Mhm.
think that's what keeps people stuck is like, oh, I don't want it to just be a grass is greener kind of thing. And I get there and I hate it also. But if you stop and actually do the work to do the reflection and like do the process that we're talking through, you are less likely to encounter that situation for sure.
Yeah. And just being really intentional. I think even if you're moving to an entrepreneurial, because lots of people think, oh, well, if I get out of corporate, entrepreneurship is going to be like this amazing thing. But you could also burn out in that, right? You could also
Yeah.
create the same cycle of things that you hate. And so just being really intentional and reflecting on what you want and what that needs to look like for you for it to be the right environment. So I think that's a big one.
1000%.
Number 2 is prep. So I know we talked a lot about financial preparation, but there's also the mental preparation and making sure that you have the documentation, the reviews, the awards, whatever it is that you have done.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think the piece about prep is it is not just for the next job. Sometimes it's for you, right? It's for you to feel, "Whew, okay, I know where my finances are. I feel confident. Okay, I know I can do this. Like, look at my record. I feel good about this, right?" So it is both so that you can show it to for other employers, or it is so that you can talk adequately and update your resume, and be able to live off the money. But I think lots of times it's also just about helping to calm your nervous system so that we
Yeah.
can actually move into that next space without a sense of frantic, without a sense of desperation. So figuring out all of the things, I know there's a lot of things sometimes, but figuring out all of the things to prep when you do it right, it does make the transition that much more smooth and that much easier, whether it's to another job or whether it is into an entrepreneurial venture. So that's important.
Mm. So good. Yes to calming down the nervous system.
Mhm. And then last but not least, connect. Basically be nice. But it is, right? I think it took me a long time, maybe not a long time, but I think it took me more of my career to realize how important connecting with people was, even more so than my work. And
Mm.
so for most of us, I'm sure if you've ascended to upper levels, you figure that out. But for a lot of us, that is what hurts us in the workplace. It is what makes it harder for us to move and to get stalled. So making sure we're connecting both professionally connecting with other people so that you can understand what you do great and where you might want to go next and to get ideas. And one that we did not mention is connecting with yourself, right?
Mm.
It goes back to the reflection, but like keep checking in with yourself, keep connecting with yourself. What do you love? What lights you up? I think those are all big pieces of it. And sometimes we don't know that until we connect with people who were like, yeah, you were great when you were doing X, Y, and Z, or you really light up when you talk about helping women in this way. Like sometimes we need that other person to reflect that back to us. So connecting in all parts and all ways with everybody, I think is our biggest takeaway on this one. Anything I
That
missed?
was so good. Connect with yourself is just, yes, all the feels. And I'm going to go ahead and add one more because I feel like we're progressive enough to share this one. And then also not that only that mental health in the workplace is a topic that's like coming up more and more and more. So I would say if to add to that list of folks, we mentioned mentors, family, friends, coaches, sponsors, yourself. I would add therapists to that, especially regardless of if it's a toxic work environment or not. Even just like when you go through transition in life, like sometimes you just need external processing that's supportive and can like hold up a mirror to yourself. And so it doesn't have to be that you're in crisis, but sometimes you just need the extra, right? You need your team. You've heard people say that it's good to have a team of mentors, mentors for different aspects. I think to add to that, I think a team, your own board of advisors could be mentors, family, therapists, spiritual leaders, like whatever you need to get to, to live your best life, I think is really key.
And some companies, this is like an aside, some companies have services. I
Yep.
can't remember the name of it right now, right? Where you can get
EAP.
therapy paid for, right? Like those things
Yeah.
are so investigate and see what you can do. It doesn't always mean that you're going to have to pay a ton of money for it.
Mhm. That was so good. I have so much fun when we chat,
Me
Arielle.
too.
There's such deep conversations. We'd love to hear from you all if we should have a third installment of Exit and Elevate. And if so, which one of these things should we double click on? And we're specifically talking about the process of, we have Arielle here's an innovation specialist, an expert, right? So like if you're somewhere and you feel like it's time to reimagine your life, my goodness, she's a perfect person to want to talk about it with. And then here I am helping folks transition in their careers and professionally and stuff. And so between the two of us, like we always have just like really insightful conversations that I hope you all have found valuable. And with that, we're going to kind of close this on out. So keep an eye out for another invitation. Possibly we'll do a third installment of this, share it with someone who could use the information. My organization, Career Steward, we do all types of programming, courses, coaching, community to help folks transition to their next phase in their professional life. I've got a free community called Steward Circle. Where we run, workshops. You can ask career questions. We've got career resources and things like that are curated. If you'd like to join that, just send me a private message and I'm happy to share the link with you to join for free. And then Arielle, where can folks reach you?
You can definitely reach me right here on LinkedIn. You can also get all sort of free conversations. I have a podcast called The Independent Mom, where I talk about a lot of this content. But at Powerful Motherhood, we do business coaching for anyone who is trying to step out of corporate into entrepreneurship to really understand how to get yourself started and off the ground, but also some money coaching, right? So if there are some pieces that you need to get yourself financially fit, financially ready to make that move, but you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn to shoot me a DM and I'm happy for us to connect. Or find me on Instagram, same name, The Independent Mom on Instagram as well.
Yes, really great combos. Okay, well, thanks, folks. This has been great. Thank you, Arielle, and
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of y'all's week.
All right, it's a wrap.